Evan Carter had made a promise to his daughter that no matter how tight things got, Christmas would always feel like magic. So, on that cold December evening, he brought 7-year-old Lily to Wonderland Park, the sprawling amusement center on the edge of Portland that transformed into a winter fantasy every holiday season. The entrance fee had cost him a full day's wages from his construction job, but watching Lily's eyes grow wide at the towering Christmas tree and the cascading fake snow made every dollar worth it. He had no way of knowing that this night would change everything, that a single act of kindness would collide with a mother's worst fear and open doors to a world he never imagined entering. The park pulsed with life. Thousands of families moved through the decorated pathways, their laughter mixing with Christmas carols blasting from hidden speakers. Evan held Lily's mittened hand as they navigated through the crowd. Past vendors selling hot cocoa and roasted chestnuts, past the spinning teacups wrapped in twinkling lights, past the long lines snaking toward Santa's workshop. Lily tugged him toward the carousel, its painted horses rising and falling beneath a canopy of golden stars. They were halfway there when Evan felt something collide with his leg. He looked down to find a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, clutching his jeans with both fists. Her face was streaked with tears, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She wore an expensive-looking white coat with fur trim, but one of her patent leather shoes had come unbuckled, and her dark curls were wild around her face. She looked up at Evan with enormous brown eyes filled with absolute terror. "Hey, hey," Evan said, crouching down immediately. But the girl only cried harder, burying her face against his knee. Evan felt his heart clench. He knew that kind of fear, the primal panic of a child separated from their parent. He'd seen it once in Lily, years ago, at a grocery store, and the memory still haunted him. Lily knelt beside him, her expression serious beyond her years. "It's all right," she said softly to the girl. "My daddy's really nice. He'll help you find your mommy." The girl lifted her head slightly, her sobs quieting to hiccups. She looked at Lily, at this other child who seemed so calm and sure, and something in her small body relaxed just a fraction. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Evan asked gently. "Sophie," the girl managed between shuddering breaths. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Evan, and this is my daughter Lily. Can you tell me what your mommy looks like?" But Sophie's face crumpled again. "I don't know where she went. There were so many people, and then she was gone and I couldn't find her, and I looked everywhere and—" Okay, Evan said, his voice steady even as his mind raced. He scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who seemed to be searching frantically for a child. The sea of faces was overwhelming: families, couples, groups of teenagers, all moving in different directions beneath the artificial snowfall. Finding one specific person in this chaos would be nearly impossible. "Let's go to the security station," he decided. "They'll be able to help us find your mom." He stood, and Sophie immediately reached for his hand. The gesture was automatic, trusting, and it made something ache deep in Evan's chest. He took her small fingers in his, noting how cold they were despite her expensive coat. With Lily holding his other hand, he began making his way toward the main security office near the park center. The journey was slow and difficult. The crowd seemed to grow thicker with every step, bodies pressing in from all sides. Sophie whimpered each time someone jostled past them, her grip on Evan's hand tightening to the point of pain. He lifted her onto his hip without thinking, the way he'd carried Lily through countless crowds when she was smaller, and she immediately wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. "We're almost there," he told her softly. "You're being so brave, Sophie." The security station was a small building designed to look like a gingerbread house, complete with candy cane columns and a frosted roof. But the cheerful exterior couldn't mask the tension inside. A line of anxious parents stretched out the door, each one clutching photos on their phones, each one wearing the same expression of barely contained panic. Evan felt Sophie tense against him as she took in the scene: all these other lost children, all these other frightened families. Inside, 2 exhausted-looking security guards were fielding questions from multiple directions. Radios crackled with updates. A whiteboard on the wall listed descriptions of 6 different lost children, their locations last seen marked with color-coded pins on a large map of the park. "Sir, we're doing our best," one guard was saying to a father who looked ready to tear the building apart. "We've got teams searching every section of the park." Evan waited his turn, bouncing Sophie gently to keep her calm. When he finally reached the counter, a young woman with a Santa hat perched on her head looked up at him with tired eyes that had seen too many frightened children tonight. "Lost child?" she asked, already reaching for a form. "Found, actually," Evan said. "Her name is Sophie. She got separated from her mother somewhere in the park and doesn't know where she went." The guard's expression softened slightly. "Sophie. Okay, let me check our list." She scanned her computer screen, frowning. "We don't have a missing child report yet for a Sophie. What does Mom look like, honey?" Sophie just shook her head against Evan's shoulder, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "She's pretty shaken up," Evan explained. "She hasn't been able to tell me much about her mother." The guard sighed, rubbing her temples. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. We're completely overwhelmed tonight. This is our busiest event of the year, and we've had more lost children than usual. We've got teams out searching. But honestly, your best bet might be to stay in the main areas where parents typically look. The carousel, the big tree, the merry-go-round. If you can keep her calm and visible in those spots, there's a good chance Mom will find you before we do." It wasn't the answer Evan had hoped for, but he understood the reality. The park was enormous, the crowd was massive, and there were only so many security personnel to go around. He thanked the guard and stepped back outside, Sophie still clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "Daddy," Lily said, tugging his sleeve. "Maybe we should go to the merry-go-round. Sophie might feel better if she can watch the horses. And maybe her mommy will come there looking for her." Evan looked at his daughter, at her earnest face and her kind heart, and felt a swell of pride so intense it nearly knocked him over. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. Let's go." The merry-go-round stood at the heart of the park, its antique horses gleaming under thousands of tiny white lights. The carousel was a genuine antique, brought over from Germany in the 1920s and lovingly restored to its original glory. Each horse had been hand-painted with intricate details, flowers and ribbons and golden trim that caught the light with every rotation. A crowd had gathered to watch, their faces illuminated by the gentle glow. Parents lifting children onto shoulders for a better view. Couples holding hands as the music played its gentle waltz. Evan found a spot near the entrance where they could see and be seen, positioning them beneath a large candy cane arch that would be easy to spot from a distance. He lowered Sophie to the ground, keeping one hand on her shoulder to let her know he wasn't going anywhere. "Your mommy might come here looking for you," he explained. "So we're going to stay right here where she can find us easily, okay?" Sophie nodded, her tears finally beginning to dry. She watched the carousel spin, her small body slowly relaxing against Evan's leg as the gentle music played. Lily stood beside her, pointing out the different horses, the white one with roses in its mane, the black one with golden hooves, the dappled gray with ribbons streaming from its bridle. Sophie began asking questions about each horse, her voice growing steadier with each one. After a while, Evan lifted Sophie onto his shoulders so she could see better and feel safer above the crowd. The little girl's hands gripped his hair gently as she gazed at the spinning lights, and for a moment, she seemed to forget her fear entirely. And somewhere across the park, a mother was losing her mind. Alexandra Pierce had built a billion-dollar empire on her ability to stay calm under pressure. She had negotiated hostile takeovers without breaking a sweat, faced down boardrooms full of men who wanted to see her fail, and rebuilt her company from near bankruptcy after her husband's death left her with nothing but debt and a 6-month-old daughter. But none of that mattered now. None of her money, her power, her carefully cultivated composure meant anything in this moment, because her daughter was missing. She had turned away for 30 seconds. 30 seconds to answer an urgent call from her assistant about a last-minute change to tomorrow's charity gala. When she looked back, Sophie was gone. The crowd had swallowed her daughter whole, and Alexandra's entire world had collapsed into a single, screaming point of terror. She searched everywhere. She pushed through families, ignored the irritated looks, called Sophie's name until her voice went hoarse. Her security team, 2 men who usually stayed at a discreet distance, fanned out across the park, communicating through earpieces, but the updates kept coming back the same. No sign of her, no sign of her, no sign of her. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Alexandra's legs were shaking, her designer heels completely inappropriate for this kind of frantic searching. She'd torn her cashmere wrap on a fence post and hadn't even noticed. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose from its pins, strands falling across her face as she ran. Every blonde child she spotted made her heart stop, and every time it wasn't Sophie, she died a little more inside. The Christmas lights that had seemed so magical an hour ago now felt like a cruel joke, their cheerful twinkling mocking her terror. She thought about every moment she'd been too busy to play with Sophie, every bedtime story she'd delegated to the nanny, every promise she'd broken because work came first, every school play she'd missed because of a meeting that seemed so important at the time. If something happened to her daughter, she would never forgive herself. She would give up everything, her company, her fortune, her entire empire, just to have Sophie back safe in her arms. When the call finally came through her earpiece, "Ma'am, we may have found her. Someone matching Sophie's description is near the merry-go-round Alexandra was already running." She burst through the crowd like a woman possessed, shoving aside anyone who got in her way. The merry-go-round came into view, its cheerful music suddenly sounding like a mockery of everything she was feeling. And then she saw them. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn canvas jacket. He had Sophie on his shoulders, her small hands gripping his hair, and he was pointing up at something, the lights, maybe, or the fake snow drifting down from hidden machines. Sophie was smiling. She was smiling while Alexandra had been dying of fear, and this stranger had her daughter on his shoulders like he had every right to touch her child. Something snapped inside Alexandra. Every news story she'd ever read about child abductions, every warning about predators in crowded places, every nightmare she'd had since becoming a mother, it all crashed together into a single, blinding wave of rage and terror. She didn't think. She just acted. "Get away from her!" Alexandra screamed, launching herself at the man. She grabbed Sophie, yanking her off his shoulders with enough force to make the child cry out in surprise. "Don't you touch her! Don't you ever touch my daughter!" The man stumbled backward, his hands raised in surrender. He was saying something, his mouth moving, but Alexandra couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears and the Christmas music blaring from nearby speakers. Sophie was crying now, really crying, and Alexandra clutched her so tight she could feel the rapid flutter of her daughter's heartbeat against her own chest. A crowd was forming around them. People with their phones out, security guards pushing through, voices overlapping in a cacophony of confusion and accusation. Alexandra saw the man's daughter, a little girl about Sophie's age, with neat braids, looking up at her with wide, frightened eyes. And some distant part of her brain registered that this didn't look right, that something about this scene was wrong. But she couldn't think past the animal need to protect her child. "Ma'am, please calm down," a security guard was saying. "Sir, can you explain what's happening here?" "I was helping her," the man said, his voice remarkably steady despite the chaos swirling around him. "She was lost. We were waiting here for her mother to find her." "Liar," Alexandra spat. "You had her on your shoulders. You were carrying her somewhere. I was showing her the lights on the tree. She was scared, and I was trying to distract her while we waited for you." "Mommy, stop." Sophie's voice cut through the noise, high and desperate. "Mommy, stop it. He helped me. He's nice. He and Lily helped me find you." Alexandra went completely still. She looked down at her daughter, at Sophie's tear-stained face, at the way she was reaching toward the stranger's little girl with one hand, even while she clung to Alexandra with the other. "What?" Alexandra whispered. "I got lost," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "And I was so scared, Mommy. And then I found Evan and Lily, and they helped me. They took me to the security place, and then we came here so you could find me. Evan said you'd probably come here looking. He saved me, Mommy. He was saving me." The world shifted beneath Alexandra's feet. She looked at the man Evan and saw him clearly for the first time. The kindness in his eyes, the protective arm around his own daughter, the complete absence of threat in his posture. He wasn't a predator. He was a father, a good father who had done exactly what she would have wanted any decent person to do if they found a lost child. And she had just attacked him in front of hundreds of people. The shame hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. Her whole body was shaking now, the adrenaline crash combining with the horror of what she'd done to make her feel like she might collapse right there on the pavement. "I'm sorry," she finally managed, her voice barely audible above the crowd noise. "I'm so sorry." "I thought." "It's okay," Evan said, though his face was pale and his daughter was pressed against his leg, clearly frightened by everything that had happened. "You were scared. I understand." But Alexandra couldn't accept his grace. Not yet. Not when she could still feel the echo of her own accusations ringing in her ears. Not when she could see the curious phones still pointed in her direction. She pulled Sophie closer, mumbled another apology, and retreated into the crowd before she could make things any worse. Her security team flanked her immediately, creating a bubble of space as she made her way back toward the VIP section of the park. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Evan watching her go. His expression not angry but sad, the look of a man who understood fear intimately, who had perhaps felt that same terror himself, and who bore her no ill will despite everything she had done. 15 minutes later, Alexandra sat in the private lounge reserved for the park's most generous donors. Sophie curled in her lap. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but the guilt had only grown stronger with each passing moment. She kept replaying the scene in her mind, the way she'd grabbed Sophie, the accusations she'd hurled, the fear in that little girl's eyes as she watched a stranger attack her father. She thought about what kind of example she had set for her own daughter, what Sophie must think of her now. She had to make it right. She had no idea how, but she had to try. "Marcus," she said to the head of her security team, "find him." Marcus hesitated. "Ma'am, are you sure that's wise? After what happened out there, I accused an innocent man of being a predator in front of hundreds of people." Alexandra cut him off, her voice tight. "I need to apologize properly. Find him." 20 minutes later, Evan and Lily stood at the entrance to the VIP lounge, looking profoundly uncomfortable. Evan had cleaned up slightly, wiped the fake snow from his jacket, smoothed down his hair, but there was no hiding the worn edges of his clothes or the wariness in his eyes. He looked like a man who had wandered into the wrong world entirely and knew it. Alexandra rose to meet them, Sophie sliding off her lap to stand beside her. The massive Christmas tree behind them cast everything in a warm, golden glow, but it did nothing to ease the chill of Alexandra's embarrassment. "Thank you for coming," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the words. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you after the way I behaved." "You were scared," Evan said again, the same words he'd used before. "Any parent would be. That doesn't excuse what I did." Alexandra took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I accused you of something terrible. In public, in front of your daughter, in front of hundreds of strangers with their phones out. There's no excuse for that." "I appreciate the apology," Evan said carefully. "But honestly, we're fine. You don't owe us anything else." "Yes, I do." Alexandra glanced down at Sophie, who was staring at Lily with undisguised longing. "Sophie hasn't stopped talking about your daughter since we got back here. Apparently, Lily was very kind to her when she was scared." Lily, who had been hiding behind her father's leg, peered out shyly. "Sophie was really scared," she said simply. I didn't want her to be scared anymore. Alexandra felt something shift in her chest, a softening she hadn't expected. She looked at this child in her second-hand coat and her carefully braided hair, and she saw a kindness that had nothing to do with money or status or social position. A kindness that was simply part of who this little girl was. That was very sweet of you, Alexandra said softly. Daddy says we should always help people when they're scared, Lily added solemnly. Because someone might help us someday when we're scared too. Alexandra's eyes moved to Evan. He looked embarrassed by his daughter's words, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. But he didn't contradict her. He just stood there, one hand on Lily's shoulder, radiating a quiet dignity that Alexandra found unexpectedly moving. Your father sounds like a very wise man, she said. He's the best daddy in the whole world, Lily said with absolute certainty. Sophie tugged on Alexandra's hand. Mommy, can Lily come play with me? Please, I want to show her the special playground. Alexandra hesitated. She had intended to apologize and let them go to close this uncomfortable chapter and never think about it again. But Sophie's face was so hopeful, more animated than Alexandra had seen her in months, and Lily was looking at Sophie with equal eagerness. Of course, she heard herself say. The next hour unfolded in ways Alexandra hadn't anticipated. She had expected awkwardness, stilted conversation, two worlds colliding uncomfortably. Instead, she found herself watching Sophie and Lily play together in the VIP area's private playground, while Evan sat across from her at a table laden with refreshments he barely touched. The girls had become instant friends, the way only children can, bonding over shared games and whispered secrets, their laughter ringing out across the quiet lounge like bells. She offered him compensation for his help, a check, a gift card, whatever he wanted. He refused politely but firmly, and something in his expression told her not to push. It wasn't pride exactly, though that was part of it. It was something deeper, a sense of self that didn't depend on external validation or material reward. In Alexandra's world, everyone had a price. Everyone could be bought or influenced or persuaded with the right combination of money and power. Evan seemed to exist outside that calculus entirely, and she found that both confusing and refreshing. It had been a long time since she'd met someone who wanted nothing from her. Why did you help her? Alexandra found herself asking. Sophie, I mean. You could have just taken her to security and left her there. Evan considered the question for a long moment. Because she was scared, he said finally. And because I'd want someone to do the same for Lily if she ever got lost. Most people would have walked away. I'm not most people. Alexandra studied him, this construction worker, with his calloused hands and his gentle eyes, and his daughter who called him the best daddy in the whole world with absolute conviction. He was nothing like the men in her world, with their expensive suits and their calculated kindnesses. He was real in a way that felt almost foreign to her now. No, she said quietly. You're not. The evening continued. Alexandra had been scheduled to attend a charity fundraiser in the park's Grand Pavilion, a gathering of Portland's elite, where donations were measured in the hundreds of thousands, and networking was an art form. She hadn't planned to bring guests, but when the time came to leave the VIP lounge, she found herself extending an invitation to Evan and Lily. It's nothing too formal, she said, which wasn't entirely true. Just a gathering with some food and entertainment. The girls seemed to be having such a wonderful time together. Evan looked uncertain. I don't think we'd really fit in at something like that. You'd be my guests, that's all that matters. He glanced at Lily, who was whispering with Sophie about something that had them both giggling. The look on his face, the love, the desire to give his daughter every good thing even when he had so little, made Alexandra's heart ache in a way she couldn't quite explain. Okay, he said finally. But just for a little while. The charity event was everything Alexandra had said. It wasn't elaborate, exclusive, and filled with people who measured worth in net worth. Evan felt the stares the moment he walked through the entrance. His canvas jacket and work boots stood out among the designer gowns and Italian leather shoes. He saw the raised eyebrows, the whispered comments behind champagne flutes, the quick assessments that found him lacking. But Alexandra stayed at his side, not hovering, not making a show of it, just present. A quiet declaration that he belonged there because she said he did. It was such a small thing, but it meant more to Evan than she could possibly know. The evening progressed with the usual parade of speeches and silent auctions and mingling that seemed more performance than genuine connection. Evan tried to stay out of the way, keeping Lily close, watching Sophie charm every adult who bent down to speak with her. The girl had clearly inherited her mother's charisma. She moved through the crowd like she owned it, because, in a sense, she did. Then the crowd shifted, bodies pressing together as some new attraction drew everyone's attention, and Sophie suddenly found herself separated from the adults. A large man backed into her without noticing, sending her stumbling. She reached for something to steady herself and found only empty air. Evan moved without thinking. One moment he was standing beside an ice sculpture shaped like an angel, and the next he was across the room, scooping Sophie up and pulling her to safety before she could fall. She clung to him instinctively, her small fingers gripping his jacket as the crowd swirled around them. "You're okay," he told her, his voice calm and steady. "I've got you." Alexandra had seen the whole thing. She'd been mid-conversation with a tech CEO when she caught the movement from the corner of her eye. The stumble, the reach, and then Evan, appearing from nowhere to catch her daughter. The speed of his reaction, the surety of his movements, the way Sophie relaxed immediately in his arms, all of it spoke of instincts honed by years of devoted fatherhood, of a man who understood that protecting a child wasn't about strength or wealth, but about attention and care. She extracted herself from the conversation and made her way to Evan's side. Sophie was already chattering about what had happened, her fear forgotten. "Thank you," Alexandra said to Evan, and this time the words carried much more than simple politeness. "Just looking out for her," he replied. "Same as I'd want someone to do for Lily." There it was, again that simple philosophy guiding everything he did. "I could use some air," she said impulsively. "There's a garden behind the pavilion. Would you join me?" The garden was an oasis of quiet amid the chaos of the event. String lights wound through bare branches, casting everything in soft, golden glow. Alexandra led Evan to a bench near an empty fountain filled with luminarias. Sophie and Lily ran ahead, playing some game that involved chasing each other around dormant flower beds and dissolving into laughter every few seconds. "I never thanked you properly," Alexandra said, sitting down. "Not just for tonight. For taking care of Sophie when she was lost. You already thanked me. I accused you of kidnapping and then thanked you. Not quite the same." Evan almost smiled. "Fair point." They watched their daughters play in silence for a moment. Alexandra noticed how he tracked Lily's movements without being obvious. The patience in his posture, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and worry. "Can I ask something personal?" she said. "Lily's mother?" A shadow passed over Evan's features. "She passed away. 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. It was right around Christmas when it happened." He paused, watching Lily spin in circles with Sophie. "That's why I try so hard to make the holidays special. I don't want Lily associating this time only with losing her mom. I want her to have happy memories too." Alexandra thought about her own loss, her husband's sudden death. Rebuilding everything while caring for an infant who would never know her father. Sophie's father died when she was 6 months old, she heard herself saying. Heart attack at 34. Completely unexpected. I barely remember the first year after, running a company, raising a baby, trying not to fall apart. You're still here. That counts for something. I'm a successful businesswoman. Not always sure I'm a good mother. You panicked when you thought Sophie was in danger. That's not bad parenting. It's someone who lost control. It's someone who loves her daughter more than anything. Evan paused. My wife used to say being broken doesn't mean you're weak. just means you've been through something hard. Alexandra looked at him, this stranger, with more insight into her heart than people she'd known for years. The girls came running back then, breathless and giggling. The moment passed. But something had shifted between Evan and Alexandra. A door had opened that neither knew how to close. Later, Alexandra overheard a conversation near the coat check. An event organizer approached Evan about construction work with the foundation, affordable housing, community centers. I appreciate the offer, but I can't take it. We pay very well. It's not about money. The timeline means working through Christmas. I promised my daughter I'd be there with her. Surely one holiday. I told my daughter Christmas, Daddy will always be there. Even if we're broke, I'll be there. I don't break promises to her. Alexandra stood frozen, phone still in hand. She thought about Christmases she'd missed or half attended, mentally composing emails while Sophie opened presents. She thought about Sophie's terror when lost was that because Alexandra had given her reasons to doubt that her mother would always be there. She found Evan near the exit, helping Lily into her thin coat with its broken zipper, but Lily looked at her father like he'd hung the moon, and Alexandra understood that there were kinds of wealth that had nothing to do with money. Wait, Alexandra said. Sophie's school has a winter program, enrichment activities, field trips. Sophie wants Lily to attend with her. I'd like to sponsor her enrollment. The warmth drained from Evan's face. You want to pay for my daughter's school. It's gratitude, not charity. Feels like charity. Evan, you think because I can't afford fancy schools I'm failing Lily? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? They faced each other, suddenly distant. Alexandra saw his pride, his defensiveness, the fear of every struggling parent, the terror of being seen as not enough for your own child. Sophie made her first real friend tonight, Alexandra said carefully. My daughter is lonely. Kids at her school perform friendship instead of feeling it. This isn't about saving Lily. It's about helping Sophie. Then say that. Don't dress it up. Fine, I'm asking for help. Sophie needs a friend. Will you consider it? Before he could respond, two small bodies hurtled between them. Sophie had her arms around Lily's neck, both giggling. Are you fighting? Sophie asked worriedly. No, sweetheart. Lily tugged Evan's sleeve. Daddy, can I go to Sophie's school? She says they have horses. Evan looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Sophie, watching with equal intensity. Two girls who found each other in a crowd of thousands and didn't want to let go. He sighed. We'll talk about it. To Alexandra. I'll think about it. Not yes, but not no. The fireworks started at 10 great blooms of color exploding across the winter sky. Alexandra found Evan standing apart from the crowd, Lily asleep in his arms. She's worn out, he said quietly. Sophie too. She's in the car. Alexandra moved beside him. I wanted to apologize again for the school thing. You offered something generous. I got defensive. Because I made it sound like charity. Because I'm too proud. He shifted Lily's weight. My wife always said I'd rather drown than admit I need a lifeguard. A rocket burst into golden sparks. Alexandra saw the weariness in his face, the weight he carried every day without complaint. I wasn't lying about Sophie being lonely, she said. Tonight was the first time I've seen her really play in months. Because of Lily. Lily doesn't have many friends either. We move around for work, so maybe this isn't charity either direction. Maybe it's two girls who need each other. Maybe. The finale built. Explosions coming faster. I don't want you thinking I'm buying my way out of guilt, Alexandra said. What happened earlier was unforgivable. I already forgave you. Why? Because you were scared for your daughter. I would have done the same. He faced her. You're not a bad person. You're a scared one. Like the rest of us. The words hit hard. She blinked. Grateful darkness hid her tears. Thank you. For seeing me. Not just the billionaire or the woman who makes scenes. That's all anyone wants. To be seen. The last firework exploded white and silver, hanging before fading. Alexandra made a decision. Have Christmas dinner with us, you and Lily. At my house. Evan blinked. What? No event, no guests, just 4 people who need each other more than they'll admit. Alexandra. Tonight has been the most real thing that's happened to me in a long time. I don't want it to end. He looked at her for a long moment. Lily stirred in his arms, murmuring something in her sleep. Okay. We'll come. Alexandra's smile was like another firework, bright and sudden and beautiful. Christmas Day arrived, wrapped in snow and pale sunshine. Alexandra's Victorian home had been transformed by decorators into a winter wonderland. With garlands draped over every banister and candles glowing in every window, but she'd asked them to leave the dining room completely alone. That space she decorated herself with Sophie, spending the morning cutting out shapes from construction paper and arguing over where each piece should go. Paper snowflakes hung crookedly from the chandelier, no two the same size. A centerpiece of pine boughs and red berries sat slightly off-center on the table, arranged by Sophie's enthusiastic but inexperienced hands. It wasn't perfect by any professional standard. It was infinitely better. Evan and Lily arrived at 4. Lily clutching a handmade card she'd spent the entire morning creating. The little girl had drawn a picture of 4 people holding hands, too big, too small, under a Christmas tree, with careful letters spelling out "Thank you for being our friends" across the top. She thrust it toward Sophie, who accepted it with squeals of delight and immediately dragged her upstairs to show her something important. They'll be inseparable, Alexandra observed, watching them go. For today, at least. Maybe longer. They cooked together, actually together. Evan made his grandmother's stuffing while Alexandra tackled potatoes. They bumped elbows and laughed at their incompetence and produced something edible, if not gourmet. The girls came down wearing matching tinsel crowns they'd made for each other, holding hands like they'd been best friends their entire lives. "This looks yummy," Sophie announced, eyeing the spread. "You haven't tasted it," Evan warned. "Doesn't matter." "It looks like love." Alexandra caught Evan's eye across the table. He smiled, unguarded and warm, and something in her loosened. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where fire crackled and the tree sparkled. Sophie presented Evan a small box with great ceremony. "I made this because you saved me." Inside was a bracelet woven from thread with beads spelling hero. Simple, imperfect. "I love it." Lily gave Sophie a drawing of 2 girls holding hands under a rainbow. "That's us, best friends forever." Sophie clutched it like gold. Alexandra watched, then spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about what you said, about keeping promises, being there no matter what. I haven't been good at that with Sophie. I get caught up in being Alexandra Pierce and forget to just be Sophie's mom. You're a good mother. I'm a busy mother, not always the same." She watched firelight on Sophie's face. "I want to be better." Then tell her, "I'm scared. Do it anyway." Such simple advice, such terrifying advice. But Evan said it with such faith that Alexandra believed it possible. When the girls fell asleep by the fire, Alexandra and Evan sat watching embers glow. "This is nice," Evan said. "I'd forgotten what family feels like. Multiple people, chaos, noise." Alexandra nodded. "I never had this. Even when Robert was alive, Christmas was always catered." "Perfect." She smiled. "This is better. Crooked snowflakes and lumpy potatoes. Love." "That's what Sophie said." Evan turned to face her. Firelight painted shadows across his features. "What happens after tonight?" "I don't know, but I'd like to find out." So would I. It wasn't a promise. Just an acknowledgement that whatever started in that amusement park had grown into something worth exploring. Alexandra took his hand. His fingers were rough, warm, despite winter's chill. They sat as fire burned low, 2 people who found each other in unlikely circumstances, watching their daughters sleep, feeling hope for the first time in years. Outside, snow began falling again. Inside, the tree cast colored shadows across four people who started as strangers and were ending as something more. Whatever came next, the challenges, the complications, the bumps in the road, they would face it together. Because sometimes the best gifts aren't planned. Sometimes they find you when you least expect them, a lost child in a crowded park. A moment of chaos that could have ended in disaster but instead opened a door to something beautiful and the chance to discover that home isn't a place but a feeling. That family can be built from the most unexpected pieces, assembled not by blood but by choice, by kindness, by the simple decision to help a stranger in need. Evan looked at the sleeping girls with their hands still intertwined. At the remarkable woman beside him who had gone from accusing him of the worst to inviting him into her home, at the dying fire that had warmed them through an evening of unexpected connection, and he made himself a quiet promise. Whatever this was, wherever it led, he would show up for it completely. The same way he showed up for Lily every single day. The same way he'd shown up for Sophie in a crowded park on a winter night that now felt like the beginning of everything. And across the room, still clutching her best friend's hand in sleep, Lily smiled at something in her dreams. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew something important, that Christmas was about finding the people who made you feel safe and holding on to them as tight as you could. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, four hearts beat together in warmth filled with crooked snowflakes, imperfect potatoes, and the unmistakable presence of love.